Hello everyone and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another Bleeding Blue edition of the look at the NHL Central, and I apologize for not having done this one for a week or so. I was out of town and I anticipated to be able to do some of these videos, but I was covering the U.S. Youth Soccer National Tournament and just didn't end up having the time, and also didn't have enough sleep, so it probably would have been rather incoherent. So we'll kind of wrap up both the draft and kind of free agency beginning. So let's start things off. Before we really get into the bulk of it, I want to kind of address this weird little topic. Most of the Blues stuff is going to be in the article, as it normally is, as opposed to the video. But one thing I keep seeing come up is this weird idea that if you're a fan, it's like, well, I'm going to support the St. Louis Blues because I'm never going to abandon them for another team, but they're also going to have to earn my trust. They're going to have to, basically, it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to like them until they start winning. I don't get that mentality. I really don't. I understand that people are upset. They thought that they were going to make a splash in free agency. They thought they were going to make a trade. They thought that they were going to build upon a Western Conference Finals berth. But we don't know that they haven't. There are still trades out there to be made. Yes, it was disappointing that they haven't made a splash in free agency. But given the contracts that were given out, it would have been stupid to jump into that. And I just don't get this mentality of, well, the team has to earn my fandom. It's like, you're not that important. I'm sorry. None of us really are. As fans, as a collective, we are. But as individuals, we really aren't. I mean, if you don't want to watch the games, if you don't want to give them your money, that's your prerogative. That is your power as a fan, but they really don't care. It's not going to affect their business strategy, and to think otherwise is really kind of foolish. But I digress. Going on to the rest of the Central Division teams, the Dallas Stars took Riley Tufte with the 25th overall pick. I expect Tufte to be a pretty decent NHL player. He's going to take probably a couple years. I haven't really read whether or not he intends to sign a pro contract right away, or if he's going to play a little bit of junior hockey, because they pretty much drafted him out of high school. He's coming from Blaine, Minnesota. I would think that he would probably go either junior hockey or college before coming up towards the pros. But you never know. The kid is fairly skilled. He's got a decent amount of size for his age group anyway. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes him. But I think he's going to be a pretty good draft pick for the Stars. The Stars did not move any of their goaltenders, which was a little bit surprising given the fact that they're paying $10 million for both of them. Not collectively, I mean. So it's going to be an interesting situation. There are still rumors that one of them might get traded, perhaps to some of the Canadian teams who are still looking for goaltending help and would greatly reward whoever give them that. But right now it's looking like Dallas might end up being stuck with the same goaltending situation that they did last year, which ended up getting them into the second round of the playoffs. But given the money that they're spending and the confusion as to who is the true number one man, that really kind of is going to play into their downfall. They've also lost Chris Russell and Jason Demers. Chris Russell is technically not official because he hasn't signed anywhere, so therefore Dallas could get him back, but right now it's looking like that is not going to be a possibility. Jason Demers has actually signed away from the Dallas Stars, so it's interesting that a team with some defensive deficiencies is going to go with some of their up-and-coming players. So they've got to be banking on the fact that they think that they weren't necessarily NHL ready, but they were still better than what they had, because what they had kind of cost them in the playoffs. The Blues were able to take advantage of some of those defensive deficiencies, a lack of solid goaltending, and a few other key issues. The Dallas Stars are stacked offensively, and they probably will be for the recent future, but it's going to be interesting to see how these up-and-coming players fit in for the Dallas Stars. The Chicago Blackhawks had a really interesting couple weeks. They traded away Brian Bickle and Teuvo Teravainen in an attempt to be able to re-sign Andrew Shaw. So you're able to dump the contract of Brian Bickle, which, again, I kind of wrote about this and have talked about it online. I don't understand how Bickle ever gets anywhere close to $4.5 million. I understand that he was kind of rewarded for a good playoff run, and they thought that he would be able to build on that, but he was just never the kind of player that deserved that kind of money. But we've seen just about every offseason, this one included, where players are getting contracts where they're never going to live up to that. The interesting surprise on that was giving up Teravainen, because he hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype that they wanted him to, but he's still been a very productive player. And to have to include him in that, just to dump the Bickle contract, was disappointing from their point of view. And it's also an attempt to keep Andrew Shaw, who didn't re-sign with the Blackhawks, and they ended up having to ship his rights over to Montreal, who signed him for an insane contract. I don't understand the lengths on these contracts. Andrew Shaw getting, I believe it was 6 years, if not 7 years. It's just, he's a young player, but you don't. He's not the kind of player that you need to wrap up for that amount of time. They were, as I mentioned, they were forced to trade Shaw to Montreal, so Montreal has got him. Montreal's got this weird stuff going on where they get rid of a key player who we'll talk about here in just a second, based on maybe personality problems, but then they bring in Andrei Radulov and Andrew Shaw, who have got big personality problems, so I don't understand what's going on there as well. The Blackhawks drafted Alex DeBrincat from the Erie Otters. He's another one that he has a chance to be a decent NHL player. He was a fairly low pick, so there's not going to be too much pressure on him for quite some time, unless he ends up being like the Chicago Blackhawks have a heck of a scouting department, so DeBrincat could end up being somebody to watch in the future. But as of right now, there's not a whole lot of expectations on him. He's probably not going to be in the NHL for 3-4 years while he continues to develop. The Nashville Predators really didn't do much over the past couple weeks. They drafted Dante Fabro. He's going to be a defender. Decent pick. Not much else. Oh, wait. No, they ended up trading Shea Weber, the cornerstone of their team, for PK Subban. So they ended up getting a heck of a swap there. There are positives and negatives for both teams on that side of the trade. In my estimation, you're losing some defending skill when you pick up Subban, but you're getting a younger player, you're getting a potentially hungrier player, you're getting a quicker player, you're getting a player that is going to provide more offensively 5-on-5. I saw an interesting stat that Shea Weber actually has more power play goals over the past couple years than some pretty impressive names in terms of forwards. So Nashville is losing a bit in that, but they got a little bit younger, they got a little bit more dynamic, and right now that is the way that the game is going. And I don't think that Shea Weber is a player that's all of a sudden going to disappear into the dust. He's still got value, he's still going to provide a lot for the Montreal Canadiens. It was a little bit shocking that he went, but it's understandable given what Subban presents and what he provides and what the Nashville Predators want. The Minnesota Wild drafted St. Louis center Luke Kunin. He is going to be an interesting prospect to watch. I don't think that he's going to make the league right away. He's got the potential to. He could end up surprising some people and coming into a prospect camp and then training camp in the fall and maybe surprising them and kind of making the roster. But I see him still needing a year or two to develop, but he's going to come up a little bit quicker than some of the other prospects that we've talked about. The Minnesota Wild have also been busy in free agency. They brought in Eric Stahl, Chris Stewart, and re-signed Jason Zucker. So they've added some programmable depth. The Chris Stewart signing I really don't get because he was already there. They had traded for him not too long ago. They didn't like what they saw, so they let him go. Now all of a sudden you bring him back. I mean, you might have gotten him a little bit cheaper, but you didn't like what he provided originally. And I mean, the guy has got a great skill set, but he doesn't want to put in the effort. We've seen it here in St. Louis, and then he's gone to 2 or 3 other teams since then. The guy has got the capabilities of being a top 6 forward, but his motivation, his work ethic is just not there. And I don't understand giving him the kind of money they did. Even though it's relatively cheap, it's still a little bit expensive for what you know that he's going to provide consistently anyway. And then the big one, as I mentioned, was bringing in Eric Staal. Eric Staal's production has taken a nosedive, but he's still Eric Staal. You still are paying a relatively cheap amount. They got him for 3 years and a relatively low dollar amount. It was kind of the numbers where if you'd known that he was going to accept that going in, maybe the Blues should have looked at him. But it's a fairly safe contract for the Minnesota Wild, and they are banking on him being able to be at least a portion of what he has been in the past, and hoping that he isn't going to be what we saw in New York, what we saw at the end of his time in Carolina. The Colorado Avalanche drafted Tyson Jost, 10th overall. He's kind of a borderline player. He could end up making the team right away, but this draft, for as talented as it is, it didn't possess a ton of players where you just know flat out there's just no way that they aren't going to be on the NHL team to begin the year. I would think that that they're probably going to sign him to a pro contract, but put him down in Lake Erie, let him try to develop a little bit. If he provides what they would like, then they can pull him up to the big club later on in the year. If not, then they leave him down there. I don't think that they would keep him in junior hockey, but that's up to them. They have a better sense of that than I do. They've also signed Fedor Tutin, Trent Vogelhuber, and Joe Colburn. Tutin and Colburn, obviously already NHL players. They're not huge signings, but they're providing a little bit of veteran leadership, a little bit of kind of grit, and that extra kind of spice that you need in there. You can't just have a bunch of young players just going around doing whatever they want, because you look and you see what Edmonton is doing with that, and it's not very good. They have all the talent in the world, but there's just no kind of constraint. These kind of players are going to provide that for the Avalanche. Trent Vogelhuber, I mentioned him because it's good to see him get re-signed. He won the AHL championship with Lake Erie, who used to be the affiliate of the Avalanche, now with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Regardless, Trent Vogelhuber, a former member of the St. Louis Bandits, so he has connections to this area, a former champion in his own right in junior hockey, so good to see him catch on with the Colorado Avalanche. Lastly, but not leastly, the Winnipeg Jets drafted Patrick Laney, number 2 overall, and then Logan Stanley, number 18 overall. Patrick Laney has the skill set. He is probably going to be in the NHL right away. If not, he's definitely going to be an AHL player. There's no way that he goes back and does not play eventually with the Winnipeg Jets at some point this season. Logan Stanley, he's going to be a development project. He's got the physical attributes, to say the least. He's 6'7", 225. He's only going to get bigger. He really has the kind of game that Zdeno Chara provides, plus he's a little bit more of a puck handler as well. So he could develop into something pretty special. I know that we did a piece on Bleeding Blue talking about, because the draft boards had him everywhere, just about after 14. There was a chance that he could have gone as high as 10, as low as 28, so the St. Louis Blues would have had an opportunity to pick him up if they wanted, but they didn't trade up because they didn't feel the value obviously there, and they obviously didn't get the player to drop to them either. So that would have been an interesting choice between Tage Thompson or Logan Stanley. But Stanley is still probably a few years away from making the NHL. He's got physical attributes, but he still needs to work a little bit more on his footwork, and obviously being able to stick handle in juniors and low pro minors is a little bit different than trying to do it at the NHL level. That'll wrap up today's recap of the NHL Central. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Leave a comment in the comment section, whether on Facebook or YouTube. Let us know. Give us a thumbs up. Let us know what you want to talk about. I mean, I'm open to broadening these things out as well. So until the next time, I'll see you then.